We are blessed by every river makes us whole with its riches and its beauty. Every river feeds our souls, and we are called as keepers of the earth. We are called to speak its sacred word for our children and our children's children. We are called as keepers of the earth. We are blessed by every mountain. Every mountain makes us whole with its riches and its beauty. Every mountain feeds our soul, and we are called as keepers of the earth. We are called to speak its sacred word for our children and our children's children. We are called as keepers of the earth. We are blessed by every forest. Every forest makes us whole with its riches and its beauty. Every forest feeds our soul, and we are called as keepers of the earth. We are called to speak its sacred word for our children and our children's children. We are called as keepers of the earth.
Welcome to the virtual worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship on the Emerald Coast. I'm Charlene Farley, a member of this fellowship and your worship service leader this morning. A question that I'm sometimes asked from people who are not familiar with a Unitarian Universalism is, what do people in your church believe? Well, I answer by saying that we believe in expansive, inclusive love toward everyone. We embrace a liberal theology that dates from the 1500s and that believes in following good example rather than dogma. We value all sacred texts, spiritual aspirations, and personal quests for meaning. So, welcome, everyone. This morning, our theme is about the earth, its beauty, and what's happening to it. Our guest speaker, the Reverend Carl Gregg, minister at the UU Church of Frederick, Maryland, addresses environmental threats to our planet. The title of his message is Winter is Coming, Wizards, Prophets, and Climate Change. May make you wonder how all these words are connected. Well, in a short time, Reverend Gregg will explain the relationships. After our service ends, our fellowship's annual business meeting will begin at 11 a.m. via Zoom. All members are encouraged to attend and cast their votes for our new board of directors, who take office on January the 1st. The link to join the meeting is in your copy of the e-news that you received this Friday. bring your own cup of coffee. And while you're waiting for the message or the meeting to begin, take time to read the important announcements that are in this Friday's e-news. New this month is the introduction of joys, concerns, and milestones. If you or anyone close to you has a personal joy, a concern, or maybe celebrating a special milestone that you want to share, please submit it to announce@uufec.com. The deadline for all submissions is noon every Thursday. And now, please join me as we continue our service. A Flame to Light Our Path by Deborah Burrell. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consumes our regrets for the past, our fears about the future, and our worries about today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace.
Good morning. Our story this morning is about being green. So the name of the book is What Does It Mean to Be Green? Does it mean being good with plants? Well, we do say that someone good with plants has a green thumb or green fingers, but that's not really what we mean today. Does it mean feeling sick in the car? Do you ever get car sick and turn green? No. Does it mean looking like a frog or a pickle or an alien? No. Being green means turning the lights on in your home only when you need them. Eating foods grown locally or even from your own garden. Walking to the park instead of getting a ride in a car. Being green means packing your lunch in containers you bring home every day. And enjoying your ice cream in a cone that you eat along with the ice cream, rather than in a paper cup with a plastic spoon. Being green means picking up trash that isn't yours and putting it in the garbage. And putting bottles, cans, plastic, and paper into recycling bins. Being green means using your food scraps to make fertilizer for your garden. And collecting rainwater instead of using a hose. Maybe you draw on 2 sides of your paper instead of just one. And give the clothes you've outgrown to someone smaller than you. You can wear your pajamas one more time before washing them. And turn off the water while you brush your teeth. You can always think of new ways to conserve. And remind grown-ups to be green too. So spread the word about being green. If we work together, we can save the world. And here are the 5 things you can do. And they all start with R, so they're easy to remember. Reduce. Use less of what you need each day. Reuse. Use the things you have more than once instead of buying something new. Recycle. Collect materials that can be recycled and send them to a recycling center. Repurpose. Find new ways to use your old things. Refuse. Don't take what you don't need. So I thank you for listening to my story today. And remember to be green.
Our world, so wonderful, spectacular, astonishing, the beauty of the land and nature flourishing. But what's happening to our mother? Why is she crumbling, melting, collapsing, dying? Us. We expose her, threaten her, deform her. She sweats tears of ice as we rise the temperature, her sharp gasps forced into high-speed gales. But we watch on as our planet wails, igniting and cremating the greens of her soil. Perhaps she wants us to choke and stifle. Sea levels climb rapidly up the shores, home flooded lives ruined, but we still ignore. Powerful words won't make the change. Powerful images won't take effect. Powerful people have tried their best. Us, destroyers, murdering a vital organ of our survival.
I want to take the risk of talking to you about a very obscure television show most of you probably haven't heard of. It's called Game of Thrones. How many of you, in all seriousness, have seen none or very few episodes of Game of Thrones? That's what I thought that might actually be the case, as popular as it is. So it is, as you may have heard, returning for a final season. So I will tell you just a slightest bit about it, because for the uninitiated. The title refers to political machinations. That's the game between various noble houses in a medieval-like world, competing to sit on this fabled Iron Throne and rule the continent of Westeros, where they find themselves. But in the world of the show, and the reason I think it's significant for this morning, is that as important as that Game of Thrones can seem, there actually are larger concerns. Each of the fictional noble houses in this show has house words, a motto that describes their core commitments as a family. And many of the series' central characters, they come from House Stark, whose house words point to larger concerns beyond the Iron Throne, embodied in what is perhaps the show's most famous lines: "Winter is coming," right? And without getting into more nerdy details or any spoilers, in the world of Game of Thrones, the coming winter will not be ordinary. It will be a long night, an existential threat to all of humanity, no matter who sits on the Iron Throne or in the White House. So one lesson from this blockbuster television show is that winning the Game of Thrones, the presidency, the houses of Congress, the control of the Supreme Court, in the short term can actually be an exercise in missing the point. You, your house, your tribe may be in power for now, but winter is coming. Or should we say, climate change is coming. Whether you like it or not, as Philip K. Dick used to say, reality is what doesn't go away even when you stop believing in it. The overwhelming scientific consensus is that climate change is coming and has already started, whether climate change deniers believe it or not. Reality doesn't care about whether you believe in it. For anyone wondering if I'm reading too much into the parallels between our current political situation and this fictional series, consider that less than a year ago, in the interview with the New York Times, series author George R.R. Martin explicitly affirmed that his series can be read in a broad sense as a parable about climate change. So, Joe, I would say just can you turn it down just a little bit? Is this a little loud for y'all? Are you all right? Yeah, I think turn the volume down a little bit. I know, okay. But in the meantime, turn it down a little bit in here. So, okay. So, thank you. So, George R. Martin has explicitly affirmed that his series can be read in a broad sense as a parable about climate change. In his words, the people of Westeros are fighting their individual battles over power and status and wealth. And those are so distracting them that they're ignoring the threat that winter is coming, which has the potential to destroy all of them and to destroy their world. And there's a great parallel there too, I think, what I see our planet doing here, Martin says, where we're fighting our own battles, all these things, and they're important issues, but none of them are important if, like, I don't know, we're dead and our cities are under the ocean. So really, climate change, he concludes, should be the #1 priority for any politician who is capable of looking past just the next election. Martin is right in many ways, although I'm glad to stipulate that part of what holds us back from passing sane climate change legislation is white supremacy, male supremacy, classism, and more. So dismantling those systems of oppression is an integral part of what must be done. Indeed, the interconnectedness of systems of oppression is precisely the focus of our congregational conversation next Sunday here in the sanctuary during the middle hour between the two services. We'll be discussing this year's UUA Common Read, which is the one book selected each year that all UUs, it's like, I could recommend one book to all UUs to read and discuss and act on. The book chosen this year is Justice for the Earth, People of Faith Working at the Intersection of Race and Class and the Environment. That we need to be doing all those together. If you have time to read some or all of the book next Sunday, great, but please do come, you're welcome, whether or not you've read all or any of the book. For now, to continue our focus on climate change, the most compelling book I've read recently is The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warning. Have any of you read that or just heard any interviews with Wallace Wells, who's the author? Okay. He's been making the circuit. It was published just 2 months ago. It's a quick read, but it's quite powerful. It's arresting from the first sentence in which he says clearly, it's worse, much worse than you think. Now, I know some of you are deeply immersed in climate science, but we can at least adjust that sentence to say it's worse, much worse than most people think. Maybe it's exactly as bad as you think. And the core of Wallace Wells' book is a 12-chapter middle section on the elements of chaos that climate change will cause around heat death, hunger, drowning, wildfires, enhanced natural disasters, freshwater drain, dying oceans, unbreathable air, plagues of warming, economic collapse, climate conflict, and systemic shifts. At the conclusion of that section, he says, if you have made it this far, you are a brave reader. Any one of these 12 chapters contains by rights enough horror to induce a panic attack in even the most optimistic of those considering it. But you are not merely considering it, you are about to embark on living it, whether you want to or not, whether you believe it or not. He says in many cases, in many places, we already are living it. I don't enjoy being the harbinger of bad news, but as a species, we're just not listening to the warnings of our best scientists. The sad truth is the opposite. More than half of the carbon exhaled into the atmosphere by the burning of fossil fuels has been done in just the past 3 decades. Which means we've done as much damage to the fate of our planet, that blue boat home that we sang about earlier, we've done, and its abilities to sustain life and human civilization, we've done as much damage since Al Gore published his first book on climate than in all the centuries and all the millennia that came before. That's an even more inconvenient truth than Vice President Gore initially presented. What I personally found most frightening to date is the extent to which we are witnessing so-called 500-year storms, 500-year floods, pretty frequently, right, with increasing frequency. One interesting angle of the Wallace Wells book is that he does not write about climate change from the common perspective of a scientist or an environmentalist or a nature lover. Personally, as a nature lover who grew up spending hours in the woods, as a vegetarian for more than 2 decades, an occasional vegan, I'm pretty easily persuadable to calls to simplify your lifestyle and reconnect to nature. In contrast, Wallace Wells freely admits, I've lived my whole life in cities, enjoying gadgets built by industrial supply chains I hardly think twice about. I've never gone camping, And while I thought it was basically a good idea to keep streams clean and air clean, I also always accepted the proposition that there was a trade-off between economic growth and the cost of nature, and figured, well, in most cases, I'd probably go for growth, he says. He adds, I'm not about to personally slaughter a cow and eat a hamburger, but I'm also not personally about to go vegan, he confesses. Now, there's a whole fake meat movement. We can talk about that if we... Anybody had an Impossible Burger? All right, what'd you think? Pretty good. All right. A lot better than the Boca Burgers of ages past. Nevertheless, the more he learned about climate change, the more Wallace Wells became convinced that change was needed and fast. And I want to use this example of Wallace Wells, this city and technology-loving journalist who has become this fierce advocate for climate change, as a bridge for reflecting on the various ways we might move forward as a species. Two of the archetypal options in the U.S. are sometimes symbolized in Jefferson and Hamilton. Jeffersonian views celebrate the rural over the urban, husbandry over industry, intense local connection over mobile liberty, thrifty independence over opulence and commerce. Considered in isolation, this agrarian ideal championed by Jefferson and embodied today in figures like Wendell Berry can seem to be the best answer, and there's a lot to admire therein. I understand the appeal, but I invite you to consider that that option was much more viable back when our country was founded and there were approximately 1 billion people on this planet, instead of today when we have septupled the human population in 2 centuries from 1 billion to 7.6 billion, and literally climbing by the second if you watch the on our way to probably 10 billion, and we might stop there, depends on who you believe. So let's also get on the table the Hamiltonian worldview, which favored big cities from the beginning, which are said to use less resources than spread out communities, increasing productivity in these big cities because fewer people are directly working with the land, maximizing the output per person, and growing more prosperous because affluence, it is said, makes societies better able to clean up environmental mishaps. To update this typology for modern times, I found helpful Charles Mann's book, The Wizard and the Prophet. Some of you may know his earlier book, 1491. In his latest book, he uses the 20th century scientists Norman Borlaug, the titular wizard, and William Vogt, the titular prophet, as representative examples of how to confront the environmental crisis we're facing. Vogt is this classic prophet who's warning that our current prosperity as a species is finite because it is based on taking more from the earth than is sustainable long term. His basic message is cut back, otherwise we'll all lose. Borlaug, in contrast, is a wizard who trusts that currently unforeseen technological innovations will save us. I worry that who's going to be saved is just the rich. Separate sermon, kind of. His mantra is innovate. Only that way will everyone win, or maybe at least the elite few will win. At least in the short term, Borlaug's techno-optimist worldview has prevailed. 20th century environmental prophets, like you can think of Paul Ehrlich, if any of you read like The Population Bomb back in the day, predicted that the world population was growing so fast that it would soon exceed the capacity of food production. It's this Neo-Thomas Malthus, who was arguing the same thing in the 1700s, and would cause mass famine. But Borlaug was a major contributor to why that didn't happen, which is the Green Revolution in agriculture. That's why we actually have lowered poverty, even as there's still 10% of 7.6 billion people who go hungry every day. That's still terrible, but it was supposed to be 80%. Before we too quickly award any permanent victories, though, to the techno-wizards, environmental prophets like Vogt warn that Borlaug, and we humans along with him, have achieved at most a Pyrrhic victory, winning at such a high cost that it might as well be defeat. From the prophet's perspective, yes, the technological revolution in agriculture has prevented mass starvation for now, but in so doing it has allowed the world population to skyrocket, again to 7.6 billion people, climbing by the second. These increased numbers make it all the more difficult to reach a sustainable future in which people can live a dignified life and sustain the planet. From a prophetic perspective, technological innovations that further exploit the land and further increase the human population, they are like fighting arson with gasoline. Personally, I do find some value in both perspectives. To respond to climate change, I suspect we will need to do both, to heed the prophetic call to cut back and live more simply, and to invest in technological wizardry to try to curb some of climate change's worst effects. Consider that if the average American were confined by the carbon footprint of our European counterparts, U.S. carbon emissions would fall by half, just by living an average European lifestyle, which is not so shabby, instead of the average American lifestyle. If the world's richest 10% were limited to that same average European footprint, global emissions would fall by a third. But we'll never achieve that level, and it gets into what you've heard me say before, the triple bottom line: people, planet, profit. Profits still end there, but you tie profits to what's sustainable for the planet and what's humane for people. People, planet, profit. But we'll never achieve cutting by half or a third if we just rely on individual choice and individual conscience. We'll need collective action along something very much akin to what's being called a Green New Deal. We need to invest in renewable energy, public services, public education, and green jobs. We need to stop building pipelines and throwing fuel on the fire. We are globally subsidizing the fossil fuel industry at the rate of $5 trillion a year. That is utter madness. And I think we're already seeing, and I think we will see ever more clearly, the parallels between the fossil fuel industry today and the lies they are telling and what we've come to see about the tobacco industry. They're just such strong parallels. It's also important to name some changes matter more than others. One of the easiest changes to make, that also, we should be honest, has the smallest impacts, is upgrading your light bulbs to a more environmentally friendly model. We've been doing that here at UUCF. We've almost changed all the lights in the building. It's a change many of us has done. It's a good thing to do, though I see that there's talk of having the government take back some of those regulations, which again is madness. It's a good thing to do, but it barely scratches the surface of what needs to be done. So do that, but we need to do a lot more. To level up, changes that have a medium level impact comparatively are replacing a gasoline-fueled car with a hybrid, washing clothes in cold water instead of hot, recycling. That's a whole separate topic to talk about as well, and how we design stuff from the beginning. Drying your clothes on a clothesline or hanger instead of an electric dryer. But all of that is, again, medium level differences. If you really want to start making a difference with your lifestyle choices, or with what we legislate that people must do, in ascending order of environmental friendliness and difficulty for many of us, are switching to a plant-based diet, buying green energy, avoiding one transatlantic flight, that does a huge amount of carbon emissions, living car-free, and having one fewer child. If you're interested in how you can get more involved locally, options include the Climate Change Working Group here at UUCF, the Multi-Faith Alliance of Climate Stewards, which is a network between this and other local congregations, the UU Legislative Ministry, which is acting at the state level, UU's for Social Justice in the Capital Region, acting at the federal level. All of those are focusing on climate change. Sierra Club, another example of an organization you could work with. Also talk of renewed focus on ways we at UUCF can strengthen our green sanctuary commitments. If you're interested in further information about any of those, please let me know. I'll be glad to connect you.
Cooperation for Human Creativity by Denise Cawley. Love our earth. Take action to consume less. Use less energy. Respect water. And be creative community, like the moss and the mushrooms. Our children's lives depend upon us.